Welcome to the MVP show. Well, this week we're on here chatting with Daryl Labar, and Daryl's just gone independent, and so we did a bit of chatting around going independent. He's an MVP, 4 times MVP. Listen, if you're a developer and you're interested in getting more involved in this area, coming up in Orlando, he's running a session called Unit Testing for C#, Dynamics 365 CE, CRM, CDS developers, right? So that might be right up your alley, some deep dive coding that you can get involved with. He's built 26 odd plugins, tools. He's got a lot up there on GitHub. But for full show notes for this episode, check out nz365guy.com/121. Now let's get on with the show. Hey Daryl, welcome to the MVP show.
Hey Mark, how you doing?
Good, man. Good to have you on here. An experienced podcaster like you should know exactly how this goes.
Well, I may be experienced, but does that mean I'm incapable of making mistakes? Did a podcast yesterday where the end recording button and the mute button are both red and they're very close to each other, and I pushed the wrong one. So right in the middle of someone talking. So that was kind of a...
Wow, that sucks. Yeah.
So I'm not as smart as I look.
I was doing a live stream yesterday, and I had this pre-canned piece of video that had been done up for me, and I put it into the feed, but I couldn't hear the audio, but of course it was going out on the stream, and so I start dicking around with it, and of course now in the live recording, there's me muting it, talking over the top of it, and yeah, it's all learning, isn't it?
Yep, we're all human.
We're all human. So you come from Indianapolis. What's so great about Indianapolis?
Besides the fact that I've lived there for the last, 14 years.
Okay, so that makes it great, right?
Well, yeah, that's why I'm there. But so Indianapolis is great for a couple of reasons. One part, it's very centrally located, so I think you can drive to 80% of the U.S. population with one day drive.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's
wow.
Yeah, because you can get all the way down to the tip of Florida. You can get all the way up to Maine. You can get mostly through most of Texas in one drive. So yeah, so the Rockies is probably the part you can't get past the Rockies to get to that section. So that's one advantage of doing that. It's also the home to the NCAA, the collegiate body for the U.S. And so there's lots of sports stuff that goes on. There's a little college Hall of Fame located here in Indianapolis and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a smaller big city, I like to say. We're only a couple hours outside of Chicago. And Chicago, if I want to go and park, it's like $40 an hour, depending on where you park. And Indianapolis, like, unless it's a game day Colts game day, even then you can park somewhere for $10 an hour. I mean, and then even on non-days you can find some free parking if you work hard enough too. So yeah, so things that I hate doing is paying for things that I don't feel like are very valuable, and that's parking sometimes. And so yeah, so that makes it nice to be able to get around and not be concerned about stuff like that. So
very cool. I should know more about it. I have a cousin that lives there with 5 children. He married a lady from Indianapolis, and so and he's been there, man, probably 30 years now.
30 years.
So
wow.
A heck of a long time. Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So, but yeah, I know very little about it. Never been there. So interesting. If I was to come there, what is the 3 best things I must do while being there?
3 best things that you would do, as opposed to me showing you something to do, or?
Yeah. No, you can show me something to do. That's cool. What would be on that list?
The things that I mean, it'd be awesome to go to an actual football game. We have a lovely stadium there, and this is an American football, not football for the rest of the listening international audience. Not the real.
Yeah, not the real game. It's the
game.
American version.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
And then locally, there's some interesting things. Even in the town that I live, they just put up a Top Golf, which is. Have you heard of Top Golf? Do you know what that is?
No.
So Top Golf is basically like, imagine bowling, where you have like I don't know if you have bowling where they have the black lights, and it's they do kind of some fun games.
Yeah. So like you're in an alley, and they do lighting effects, and you play your 10 pins and stuff like that.
So imagine that, but imagine that golfing. So it's they have like a 3-story structure with like a driving range type net that goes around it, and you have like different points you get for like hitting it out there, and they have lots of food they come out and serve and stuff. So it's kind of a fun experience. But also on top of that, of course, we do have the Indianapolis 500. We have the Speedway here in Indianapolis. So catching a
That's probably what
race.
it's most famous for, right?
That's what it's probably most famous for. I have actually not gone. Actually, I took my son once to a pre. I think it was a poll day where they go and figure out what position they're actually going to be racing in. So I haven't actually gone to the race, but I've been to a few races at the track, and it's kind of an interesting experience. Definitely loud and something that is rather unique to Indianapolis and to other areas around the U.S. that have a racetrack. So yeah, it's fun to watch.
Here's a little fun fact. I sold a pace car from the 1960s that raced on that track.
Oh, cool.
Like, I sold it on behalf of a client, and that did a custom website for them. This is way back before my Dynamics days doing websites and stuff. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that it was actually bought by a gang member from jail and then paid with by cash. It was some random stuff, but it had been shipped to New Zealand as well. So, but they're collector's items, of course, these days. So, very cool. So, yeah,
the other random factor, I think Indianapolis Airport is consistently rated one of the best in the U.S. So that's, at least when you come in, you don't have to have a painful airport to go through. So that helps too.
Okay. So that's a win. That's a win, right?
That's a win.
I like it. So, tell me, what's your Jedi skill set when it comes to all things business apps?
My skills, my experience really lie in the core of business, the core of CDS, the core of the XRM platform. That's where I'm at. That's where I specialize in. That's where I want to be the best that I could possibly be in that area.
You're a full-on dev.
I'm a full-on
code
dev,
monkey.
Code monkey, with the idea that my best
developers. Yeah. Anything else? What else?
What else I do besides developing is my Black Magic stuff on this space. Lots of tools I've created for that space.
Give me a rundown of what they are, just at a high level.
So there's a couple tools for the XRM Toolbox. The Early Bound Generator, that's a developer tool for them to go through and generate typings for their entities that they've created and help their life and productivity in that manner. There is the Attribute Manager. That's one that if you've ever created a field and added it to 4 views and 2 forms and said, dang it, I named this thing wrong, or dang it you be a money, not a double or a decimal, or it should be, I could change the wrong type. You can actually use that to go through and change it.
So are you fundamentally in the database then changing that field?
Well, of course, you don't have access to the database, but I'm doing everything through the API to go through and do that. So I actually drop the field. I go through, remove all the dependencies, drop the field, and recreate it with the methodology that you describe that you want. So yeah, it's very, very powerful.
So if there was data in there, are you like caching that data away, and then when your new entity's built, you're bringing that back in?
You got 2 options. You can choose to migrate the data or not migrate the data. The migration of the data is not the fastest possible way. So if you've got 30,000 records, it may take you 10 minutes, and if you got 1 million, you probably don't want to do it that way. But you can pause the tool at every step of the process. So if you've got another tool that you want to migrate the data with that would be faster and easier and more safe in your mind, then you can go ahead and pause the tool, because it actually creates a temporary attribute that you migrate everything over to, and then it deletes the old one and then recreates it the manner that you want it with the same name. Or you can just change a different name and doesn't use the temporary. It's smart enough to figure that out and then migrate it back.
Wow, very cool. So tell me, what was the spark of inspiration? I assume you're on a project, and what was the nexus?
So the root of that tool is back in 2012. So when I first started working on CRM, it was the 2011 product, and they came out with global option sets to that release. So prior to that, every single text value pair for those drop downs were solely tied to a single entity. which meant if you wanted to have a list of U.S. states, you had to recreate that for every single entity, which is really annoying. And you couldn't compare things. If you had a workflow, you couldn't compare this value to another value. So the global option set solved that problem, but the problem was we had all these local ones that we wanted to be global. So I originally wrote the tool to be able to handle that, to migrate from local to global. And then I was like, well, there isn't that much work involved to be able to change the type and do that work as well. So then I extended that and put it in the XM toolbox, and that's been out there for a while now. So
Wow. Very cool, very cool. Do you kind of have a feel of which of your tools are most popular in the community? Do you see, are you tracking any analytics around, which ones are people using the most?
so the XM toolbox does give you like how often things have been downloaded and ran and stuff like that. So the attribute manager is probably the best one in that namespace. I do have a couple other developer tools that are out in NuGet that people download as well, and it's not. I don't think that's quite as. The problem with that is with the tool. I mean, on the XM toolbox, you may have 5 people in your company that download it separately, and that's 5 times it's downloaded. Versus the other one, you may download it once as a part of for your company, and everyone uses it. So it's kind of hard to figure out numbers in that aspect. But yeah, those are some of my more well known tools. So.
Cool. So being that you work, in the whole back end of CDS, tell me, how would you explain in layman's terms a data model, not a common data model, what Microsoft provides, but a data model? So you've been asked to build a brand new app on the platform. Tell me about architecting the data model.
So how would I actually go through and define the data model? I mean, well,
Yeah, starting with a piece of
starting
paper.
with a piece of paper. Well, before you write anything down, you really have to understand as much as you possibly can about what the intent is and what the intent should be for the data that you're attempting to capture. And you have to figure out what sort of relationships are they going to have. Are these going to be related in a one-to-many ways, a one-to-one ways, in a many-to-many way, and trying to figure out how then you're going to build out that model to be able to capture and maintain that data in the manner that you see fit. If you start getting into some really large projects, sometimes the more quote unquote perfect route of having the data being in one spot can really affect performance. And so you have to what's called denormalize, which is make basically a copy of it and put it somewhere else, just to make the querying easier or faster for the end user as well. So those are things you have to think about.
So, what are you talking about? A join as such, or like a third entity, the invisible entity? Or what are you meaning there?
So the relationships would be whether it's a join or a third entity, but other times it's, well, maybe I want the information that's on this third entity in the join, but I use it all the time. This other one, maybe we'll just put it on the other one and then make sure it's in sync. So that way you don't have to incur the cost of going and looking up those other entities or that other type of information. So.
Awesome. I like it. In layman's terms, can you explain to me a many-to-many relationship and a one-to-many relationship?
Sure. So, so a one-to-many is probably the easiest idea, and that's the idea that you can have a single thing that is related to multiple of another type. So if you think of your contact and your account, this is probably the simplest one, where you can have one contact work at multiple companies or multiple clients. And so they would have a record on the account that says, okay, this is our primary contact, and it's this person. So that person could be related to both of those records, but that person's data is not duplicated twice. It's there once. Their first name, their last name, their address is there once, and you might be able to see it on the actual account information, but once you click on it to edit it, you're editing it in that one place, and everybody gets is sharing that same data. So that's the one-to-many. Then the many-to-many is where you actually go out and say, okay, so it's not just this contact or this account can have multiple contacts in it that are then at multiple places. So rather than the primary contact, maybe this is just has worked there or something, previously employed, and so that way you wouldn't have the actual you wouldn't have to actually tie the actual record to the account itself. You'd have to have another entity, another record that actually specifies, hey, this thing over here, this account is tied to this contact over here, and you have lots and lots of rows of those that support that relationship and could have additional metadata to it as well. Maybe what time they started the employment, what time they ended the employment, or you can even head in there twice. So if I worked at a company twice, which I have done before, left and came back, you'd have to have a start and end date in there in 2 different records, and so you'd be related many, many times to each other. So yeah, there's kind of the fun to figure it all out.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I was just preparing for a presentation at User Group next week, and I just wanted to validate
so you want
my
me to,
ideas.
you want
So,
me
hey,
to do your work for you.
man,
I understand.
thank you very much. Perfect. I've actually got a blog post coming out in the I don't know. It's either coming out tomorrow on my schedule or on Sunday. I can't remember which day, but it's actually around data models, because I just find I get so many questions from people around. What's CDS in context of the common data model? Because that's commonly hearing on all Microsoft's marketing, CDM and CDS. And there's kind of this disconnect for a lot of people of what the difference is. What's the difference from a schema than actually the physical representation of that in a database as such. So I'm just demystifying, if you like, a data model, a common data model, and then CDS, and how do those three kind of come together. But I was just hoping you might have given me something I didn't know. But not saying I knew it, but like I like the simplicity you kind of explained that. It's cool. That's cool. So February this year, you decided to go independent, which I found intriguing. And intriguing. Well, you know why I found it intriguing. We've sat in backs of cars and had chats and stuff in the past around why going independent just wasn't your cup of tea. It wasn't your type of thing, and about a year and a half later, here you are, independent. What led you down that path?
So I guess I'll back up. My original work history before that was at very, very small companies where I was the only developer, pretty much, which made it really hard for me to learn, because I basically only learning I could do was in the community. So I guess that maybe helped for me to get my MVP status, was I spent a lot more time doing community stuff. But then I did work at a large partner, worldwide partner, and got to experience working with a group of people and learning from a group of people. And so that was what I was really wanting to have. And obviously I couldn't do that at that level, starting my own business. So I started doing that. But then after a while, I got to the point where I realized I'm working just as hard as I would work for myself for this other company, and I'm getting paid about half as much. So why would I continue to do this? And plus, if I ever had to, I've got 3 kids, maybe one of them would like to join me someday. I don't know. I grew up on a farm, and it's actually a centennial farm, so it's been owned by my family for over 100 years. My great-grandfather bought it. My great-grandfather bought it. He handed it to his son, which is my great-uncle. My dad bought it for him, and then my brother is now farming for my dad, who's retired. So, so it's been in our family since like 1912 or something like that. So, so just the idea of having something that, if they want to, they can either join me in or whatever is something else that I really wanted to involve. And it's kind of hard to start a company when they're 18 and have them join you, and so I kind of had to say, I need to do this sooner rather than later. So
I love that forward thinking. That is totally awesome. So you've been doing it now for what, 6 months? How's it going?
It was a little rocky at first in that I wasn't quite ready to make the jump still at that point. I was wanting to wait a little bit longer, but I did have an opportunity. Someone said, hey, I've got work for you that I want you to on my project for the next 10 months. And I'm like, well, perfect. If I'm going to quit my job and go work for myself, having 10 months of guaranteed work is what I should do. So I went and quit my job, and I flew down to talk to the client I was going to work at. We spent a day working on him, and I flew back, and I haven't done a single bit of work for him since. So
wow. Hang on a second. So are you contracted to them though?
No, I was not.
Okay, so you quit your job before you had a signed contract for your 10 months of work.
Yes, probably not the smartest thing in my life to be able to do, but I don't know these things. I don't know how these things normally work. It sounded like everything was, I think, signed up and ready to go, but it still sounds like it's in the pipeline. They're just not ready to move on it yet. And that's really what it is they're just not ready to move on it yet. So, but I reached out to some people in my connections, and within a couple of days, I had some marginal full-time work, and then I was able to get on another client very quickly. So I think I only had about 20 hours worth of work that I wanted to work and didn't have any work so far. So yeah, I was amazed how quickly I was able to find something else and move on and not skip a beat. So
Awesome. So what I find interesting is a lot of people think that going independent is amazing, and the hiccup usually comes 2.5 years later, three, let's say at the outset, and basically you've expended all your friends and family, if you like, all the people that knew you when you were working for other companies and things like that, and then the work dries up, and you're like, oh my gosh, now I need to go back and get a real job.
Are you trying to
right?
keep me from sleeping, Mark? What's going on?
So what I'm saying is that I don't want to see you there. So my recommendation to you is this: is I read a book by a Canadian a couple of months ago, around April, and it was called Company of One: Why Staying Small is the Next Big Thing in Business. And it's about somebody going independent just like you, but the idea that you shouldn't see yourself as a contractor or a freelancer, but you should see yourself as a company of one. And if you take a look in the book, it's so practical. This guy talks it like he just pretty much told your story of working for companies, working out, you know what? I'm doing all this work for somebody else. I could be doing it for myself. But then he has gone on but he thinks of everything he does as a company of one rather than trying to grow, 50 employees or anything like that. And I just think that it might give you some amazing type insights, particularly around avoiding the, second, third year when you've kind of exhausted all the people that know you so far. Does it make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. So yeah, send me the book. I'll take a look at it.
So Company of One.
Company One.
Take a look on Company of One. Take a look on Amazon. Buy a guy called Paul Jarvis. But amazing. Because I think what you're doing is the future of work. I think as we go through the next 5 to 10 years, I think a lot of people, and just my observations in our industry in the last couple of years, a lot of consultants, in the biz app space have worked for these big partners. And now they're going, you know what? I don't want to just work for another partner anymore. I want to still do what I do, but I don't want to just work for the next partner. And so I think that, we're going to see a lot more people following in your footsteps.
Yeah, the next desire, and that's kind of where the struggle is right now. Now I'm a company of one. I don't have a desire to have a company of 50, but I would like to have 2 or 3. I'd like to focus on be like a developer shop where you come in. I mean, I've been on the other side of the table at consulting firms where you're trying to land a project. It requires, it's going to require 3 or 4 devs to do the project in the timeline the customer wants, and you don't have them on your bench because developers are expensive. You don't have them sitting on the bench. And so, being that third party to come in that has the expertise and the skill to do it, that's where I like to see my niche be. But that means that I need to start looking to hire people and training them and finding work for them. And it's a lot easier for me to say, hey, I'm an MVP. I've got all this experience. I'd like to work for you and make your project successful. But it's a lot harder for me to say, hey, I've got somebody that I've just trained. They're good too. Trust me. So that's the part that I definitely am going to be, I'm getting some capital set up and being able to feel like I can support someone else's livelihood before I go out and make that jump. So.
Yeah, interesting. Because a potential mix for you might be not just think of consulting, but think of product development.
Yep, creating something and selling it. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So in other words, because you're saying, let's say you took on 5 folks over time, right? And they're all now on your bench, not on the partner's bench. Your partner's happy because on demand they can get you, no risk to them, all upside to them, right? All risk is on you because you're responsible for feeding them and their family, right? And paying their mortgage. So it sits on your shoulders now in this scenario. What I'm saying is that if you had a product stream to your business, what you're doing is basically building an income stream that doesn't require constant trading time for money. And as well, those resources, if they're not out on a project, you specifically have an in-flight dev, project that has a backlog that can be developed and be sold independently of you constantly trading time for money. Yep,
that's the idea, and that's what I'll do when I don't have work at the current point in time. But at the current point in time, I got more work than I can handle, so I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, at some point in time, I may just stop doing the work I have just to create the product. That way, I've got something to help subsidize that, as well as to help publicize the company too. So, but right now I haven't even like created a website, so maybe I've got some other things I need to do first too.
Well, true. So you've been an MVP for 4 years, is that right?
Just got renewed, so yeah, I think it's 4.
Yeah. Were you worried about the renewal?
Yeah, I think I'm always worried about my renewal, just because I think it's getting harder and harder for developers to get renewed in our space.
Do you really? I wouldn't have thought that at all.
Well, I say that because of the reach. Let's say that you've got 2 people. One's a citizen developer, one's a developer. Citizen developer creates a YouTube channel, and the number of citizen developers in the world, let's just throw a number out there, 100,000. So he gets 10% of the people to look at it. He's got 10,000 views. Let's take a full developer, and
Full stack developer,
let's say a full stack developer. How many of those are in this CRM space in the world? Well, there's not 100,000. They're going to be like 1,000. Well, let's say he gets 100% of the people to look at it. He gets 1,000 views. So one has 10% of the total audience looking at it, and he has 10,000. The other is 100%. He only has 1,000. So from a purely numbers standpoint of what's your reach, the developer, full stack developer, is going to have a more difficult time comparing numbers with the citizen developer in that way. So that's what I'm saying. I think it's harder for a developer that is just doing stuff for developers, like learning wise and blog wise, to maintain their MVP. I know we've lost quite a few developer MVPs this last session. So that's my concern on that.
Yeah, was there 18 people all up that didn't renew, I think, when I counted up the list?
Is there a list of that? I'd like to look at that list so I know kind of more on that. But.
So that list is, on our back channel. Are you on Slack?
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
I'll look at it. I'll go find it.
Yeah. Guido put it up the other day. He got he did an extract and got them all there. So yeah, interesting list. Interesting list. I didn't realize, how many, we'd lost so many. So it's quite interesting. Tell me, best thing about being an MVP?
Community, the MVP community, being able to have all these instant friends in all these places, and we had someone had a birthday here while they were in Indianapolis, and MVP was, and I had all the MVPs that were here for the conference and the birthday over to my house, and just had a great time. And whenever I finally do make the plunge to go to Europe or whatever, I know I've got MVPs in different countries that I can go talk to, figure out where to eat. And even my wife was flying through France. It's like, hey, does she have enough time to go to the Eiffel Tower? And she's on a layover, and the French MVP is like, nope, no, she doesn't. I'm like, okay, all right. Well, at least she didn't get stuck and miss her flight. So yeah,
you do get that really good type of localized knowledge right from the community around the world. I totally agree. Agree.
Mm-hmm.
Sick, man. Well, we're 27 minutes in. I like to do a few wrap-up questions. And first of all, what is the wrap-up question you'd like me to ask?
Oh, I'm trying to remember the ones you normally ask. I'm not even sure if I've got one for you.
Here's one. What is one thing that most people don't know about Daryl Labar?
Is that the actual question, or is that what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, that's the question.
That's the question. So what one thing do people not know about Daryl Labar? I was a college football player, maybe.
Wow, what position?
So in high school I played linebacker, and when I went to college I wasn't fast enough. I had a 5 flat 40 time, which is okay, but not good enough really to play linebacker. You need lower than a 5 in order to do that. So I gained 40 pounds and played defensive tackle. So I was on the defensive line with all the big boys. So I was playing against guys that were 300 pounds or more on the other side of the line usually. So
wow, there you go. We've learned something new that nobody knew about Daryl Labar, apart from all the people that was in his team, went to school with him and his family. But it's a great start. It's a great start. One bit of advice that you would give to somebody that is a developer that likes the idea of potentially one day becoming an MVP. What's your recommendation?
Yeah, I actually had someone that came and took me out to lunch and asked me that very, very same question. So for me, there's no magic ticket, but for me, the way that I see it is to know what part are you going to bring the most value to the community, and then go do it. Because if you're not bringing value to the community, A, no one cares, and B, you're not gonna find any joy out of it. But when you're doing something that brings value to the community, then you get to it fuels you on to do more, because hey, look at all these people that are using what I have, or doing what I'm consuming what I'm giving, and encourages you to do it more, and plus it helps to actually improve the community as a whole. So find what that is. If that's blogging, blog. If that's creating tools, create tools. If that's creating frameworks for people to use, that's create a framework. If that's going and speaking, go do that. So figure out what is the most value you bring to the community, and go and do that. And don't be focused on, oh, this guy has a great YouTube channel, I wish I can do that, when maybe that's not where you bring the most value.
Or your fizzy drink, or whatever you want to call it. Daryl, it's been fantastic to have you on the air. You have a podcast, you have a YouTube channel, you have Twitter. How can people find you on those channels? So
on Twitter, it's DD Labar. On YouTube, I think it's just Daryl Labar, or DNA Labar. It's my Google account. I think I haven't actually set up like a full-fledged, like, separate account from that. So that's my personal account that's on there. You can find me on LinkedIn under the Daryl Labar, but please, if you do, just mention how you found me, so that way I've got some way to connect you. If you just send me a request and you don't say, hey, I heard you on this, or hey, I saw you this, or hey, I used this, I don't have any reference to why I know you, or why you'd want to be my LinkedIn acquaintance. So if you put that on there, I always accept that. But if you don't have any reason for it, and I don't know who you are, I usually don't, just because I don't know what sort of feed information I'll start picking up and stuff like that.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the MVP Show. If you're interested in becoming a Microsoft MVP, I encourage you to look or follow my social media, particularly YouTube at the moment. I'm doing a series on things you need to do if you want to prepare to become an MVP. Anyhow, full show notes can be found at nz365guy.com/121 for this episode. See you next week.